Welcome to The Rest is Politics US with me, Katty Kay.
And I'm Anthony Scaramucci, and the reason why I'm a little slower today, Katty K, is that your goal hanger people have had me up for 2 nights. I don't know what's wrong with these people, okay?
So you know how I said to you it was
Okay.
just going to be an hour a week? What I meant was that there was going to be an hour a week you wouldn't be doing the podcast.
And before we start this podcast, I'm issuing
You
a
didn't
formal
laugh.
apology.
It was not a bad joke.
The reason I'm not laughing is because sometimes the things are so true, Katty. I mean, they pierce your heart. It's hard to laugh, but I have to issue a formal apology to Rob Peston. You know who he is, Rob?
Yes, I do.
He's The Rest Is Money. Yeah, so I missed his ITV show because these goal hanger people, they had me held hostage. The only thing they didn't do is put a bag over my head, thank God, because you know how much I like my hair. But I just telling you, these people work like crazy. But Rob, I'm sorry I missed your ITV show.
Well, welcome to the world of broadcasting in election week, which is our kind of Super Bowl, and you basically never get on television. I was the same. I had a whole night on the BBC, and it was, wow, what a night it was. And we just wanted to catch up with everybody. It's at the end of this week. Now we've had a couple of days, both of us, to kind of digest what happened and look a little bit more at the numbers around what happened and give our take in the first half of the show about how Donald Trump pulled this off, the greatest comeback in American political history. And then in the second half of the show, I think it's worth us looking at the Democrats a bit more and what, the post-mortem that is already starting. I mean, there's a little bit of a circular firing squad going on in the Democratic Party. I don't know how helpful that is, but I think they are going to go away and figure out how can they rebuild, because this was, as Barack Obama would say, really a shellacking for them. For our international viewers, a shellacking means it was a very, very, very bad night.
Can I be more graphic than that? Okay,
Yes,
it
okay,
means
go on.
you're painting the body with shellac. The body's down, flat on the ground, and you're just painting it with shellac, trying to preserve the dead body. Okay, so
They
that's
got the
how
shit
bad it
kicked
was.
out of them, I think
They
is
did.
one way of putting
They
it.
did. There you go. There you go.
That's,
Just so you know, I have a
channeling our grease rolls.
Okay, I have a cursometer, and you're up on me. Okay, on the cursometer. I'm so happy about
I
that.
apologize to Mrs. Scaramucci.
This is the only place in the world where somebody's up on me on the cursometer. So thank you for that. But I gotta say 3 quick things. Get your reaction to 3 quick things.
Yeah.
And I want you to think about the first one. There was a great meme going around on Monday. It was a dad at the polling booth, and there's a little girl, and the little girl's looking up at the dad, and she says, "Daddy, who are you voting for?" And the dad looks at her, "I'm voting for you." And this is a meme for the Harris team, women's rights, reproductive rights, etc. But you know what the real meme was, Gaddy? It was a mother at that booth, and there was a young son, and the young son was looking up at the mother and saying, "Mom, who are you voting for?" And the mom looked down and said, "I'm voting for you." 46% of the women in this country said, "Hey, I'm done with this woke culture. I'm done with the ultra criticizing of my boys in this culture. And you know what? Enough is enough. I'm voting for my son." And I don't know if the Democrats have picked that up, but that is 100% what happened, particularly in what you and I, or what I call America, which is the buckle of the Bible Belt in the South and the Christian orthodoxy around the country. They have had enough, Katty K, with woke culture. They have had enough with the constant criticisms. And whether they're voting against their economic interests or not, this is an emotional thing about tradition in the United States. I would like you to react to that.
I think you're right that there was clearly an anti-PC move, and you and I have spoken about this, and a feeling. I don't know that the meme of mothers with sons is how I would phrase it. I think it's more that there was a lot of young men, as we saw, and actually young people, but particularly young men who voted for Donald Trump, who, as we have said before, feel that the Me Too movement, a kind of the DEI movement generally, left them behind. And they are doing worse in school. Increasingly, women are better paid in this country. And some of that is threatening. And this is a segment of the population that doesn't feel that wokeism writ large help them. They feel they can't say the jokes they would like to say. And this is something Donald Trump really tapped into, that, you can say what you want. It started with Happy Christmas rather than Happy Holidays. That was the version of 2016. But this time he tapped into a feeling of young men not knowing what manhood is in America at the moment. How can they be men? And more, and that sounds like it's critical of young men, but I think it's at a more sort of fundamental level, it's a whole generation of people who realize they're not going to be able to support their families without their wives having to work. And that's not what their fathers had, and that's not what their grandparents had. One of the best articles, I think, that came out of this campaign was not about your economic status, but it's about your comparative economic status, how well off you used to be compared to how well off you are today, and how well off your neighbors are, or your circle is, compared to how well off you are, and how well off your parents and your grandparents were compared to how well off you are. And in that bracket, a lot of young men are less well off than their fathers were and grandfathers were, and a lot less well off than many of the women around them who are doing better in schools and colleges. So I think I would frame it slightly differently, but I think you're right that this was a two-part election for me. It was culture and economics, and the cultural side of this, and we can get into the Hispanic vote in a minute. The cultural side of this was political correctness has gone too far, whether it's on transgender issues, whether it's on DEI issues, whether it's on Me Too, and this was a kind of pushback against that. So I think we're on the same. We're talking about the same thing, but I frame it slightly differently.
So you have two things. It's a little trivia quiz. I'm going to read you something. Who wrote it? And then I want you to react to it. Okay, are you ready? Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
This time really will be different. This election was a crushing defeat for political lawfare, critical race theory, woke campuses, biological males in women's sports, genital mutilation of teenagers. It was a crushing defeat for the Ivy League. The legacy media. Are we legacy media, Caddy?
No, we're new media. We're new media.
We're new media. Okay. So legacy media crushed, and Hollywood, traditional Hollywood, has been crushed. But it's also a defeat for the neoconservatives, the never Trumpers, including Liz Cheney, as well as all the former Trumpers who officially turned their coats and backed Harris. That's me.
That is
Caddy.
you.
That's me. Let me just look around. Let me look around. Hold on. I'm looking around in my office to see if there's anybody else here. Anybody here? No. It is me. That's me he's referring to. Okay, hold on.
I'm just waiting. Done. I am just waiting for the call to come in for them to say to you, Anthony, do you want to redeem yourself?
And it was a victory for SpaceX, the Starlink, for Polymarket, for Bitcoin, and for Palantir. Okay, but also for people like Mark Andreessen, Joe Lonsdale, and Joe Rogan, and for what I believe is the free press. This is a new generation of builders who are represented by the autistic virile. Okay, I'm ready to throw up. Could you pass me a vomit bag, please, through the computer screen? The autistic virile qualities that Elon Musk exemplifies.
Okay, I think Elon Musk is such a narcissist. He probably wrote that himself about himself.
So that's Niall Ferguson. That's Niall Ferguson. Okay, and
yes,
I do. Or maybe you go Neil Ferguson. I don't know how to pronounce it in your country, but he's writing this. He's a conservative. It is literally a metaphorical middle finger. Okay, and now the question is, where are we going? So I want you to react to it. Are we going to heal the country and unify the country, or are we going to continue to jam at each other? So, by the way, the left does it too. The left jams the right gets pissed off, and they start jamming the left. Are we going to cut that out and try to figure this out?
I think there is some truth in this, but I think it is a slightly oversimplistic framing. With all due respect to Neil Ferguson, who I like and is brilliant, but
brilliant guy. I subscribe to his research.
It's not just that. I mean, I think what this ignores, yet clearly, this was a seismic shift in the American voting population in the way that 2020 wasn't. This was much more of a 2008 building of a new coalition. But I think it ignores inflation, which was a huge thing in this election, and which the Democrats, and we'll talk about them after the break, just couldn't divorce themselves from with this candidate who is part of this administration. But when you have the price of beef going up on average 45% around the country. You have rents going up 30% since COVID around the country. You have the price of milk going up 25% around the country. And the inflation wealth gap means that rich people don't feel this because they own their own homes. So they are not paying rents. They haven't seen the rent rises. But who has seen rent rises? Young people have seen massive rent rises. I know this from my own kids. Poorer voters, that huge swathe of Hispanics who voted for Donald Trump, they've been the victims of all of these rent rises. Poor white Americans, poor Black Americans. If you are poor and you don't own your home, COVID has hit you, and the inflation that followed COVID has hit you in a way that is not like what you and I are feeling, Anthony. Our assets have gone up massively in value over the last 4 years. And this is a segment of the population that, had been hit by 2008, was just recovering, because if you were poorer, you were really only starting to recover your economic status in America around 2017, 2018. 2016, maybe, if you were lucky. And then what happens? COVID hits and you're hit again. And it's like a segment of the population that's been battered and battered and battered. So whilst I accept that there was a cultural element to this, and certainly that a lot of people, I mean, this has been true since the 1990s, a lot of people in conservative America feel dissed by Hollywood and the traditional legacy media and feel looked down upon by those coastal elites. I accept all of that, and that's very true, and something the Democratic Party hasn't wrestled with. But this ignores that there was a very real economic component to this election.
I agree. Yes, is the answer. Yes. Okay, my third one. Okay.
I like this.
Work. Yeah. Okay. There was a song when I was a kid called Car Wash, work and work.
Yeah.
Work and work your fingers to the bone. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This son of a bitch named Donald John Trump has been on this thing since he left the White House. Okay. He's been working. He's been moving around the country. I live in a blue state. Okay. A blue state, Catty K. And I also live in a place called Nassau County, which is Republican tinged, but not too Republican. Tom Suozzi, the Democrat in this area, and a very close personal friend of mine, won the House of Representatives here. Donald Trump crushed Vice President Harris in Nassau County. Now, what happened in Nassau County earlier in the year? A very young man, 31 years old, with a wife and child, a New York City police officer was murdered. And Donald John Trump went to his funeral. Okay, is this a state he's going to win? Not a state he's going to win. He went to the funeral. Okay, and that had resonation. Okay, point number 2, inside the work category, he did something that I missed. And so I apologize to podcast listeners and viewers. What did I miss? Why was he going to California? Why was he going to New York? Why did he go to Madison Square Garden? He wanted the popular vote. He wanted to shut everybody up, Caddy, and he knew those totals would rise in those areas. She only won New Jersey by 5%. She only won New York by 6%.
She only won Virginia by about 4%.
He's turning the country red by showing up in places that these people traditionally didn't go to. Okay, and then my last point in the work my fingers to the bone, he made everybody on his campaign hustle alongside of him. Once again, like in 2016, he dragged the entire campaign with him. And I gotta tell you, you gotta give him credit. Somebody that did that, Caddy, is a friend of both of ours, David McCormick. David McCormick spent a year and a half traveling Pennsylvania, campaigning every day. He's up by 30,000 votes right now with about 180,000 to go. They won't call the race only because Casey won't concede, but he's going to win that race. And because of Donald Trump, you're going to have 53 senators. And because of Donald Trump, it looks like the House of Representatives is also going to the Republicans. So what's your reaction to that? Work and the popular vote.
Yeah, I think the popular vote, and I agree with you, we both missed why he was in that part of the reason he was in Madison Square Garden. I think there was another reason. I mean, if you look at how well he did in the Bronx, how well he did in Queens, how well he did in the boroughs of New York and the surrounding areas of Manhattan, there was another reason that, I mean, and I do think the Hispanic male vote is something that Democrats are going to have to look at. The black male vote, actually less. I mean, black people didn't turn out in the numbers that they turned out in 2020. And I think the Democrats are going to have to look at that. And we can talk about that in the second half. But I think Donald Trump, in going to that funeral, also tapped into a kind of security immigration issue amongst Hispanics that was important, showing that, you're just Americans. That message of his, you're not Hispanic voters, you're American voters, and you don't necessarily want this border to be open and other immigrants coming in. And that doesn't mean you're racist, which gets back to the cultural thing and a little bit what Neil Ferguson was saying. But yeah, he drove up the popular vote. He could end up winning the popular vote. I think we're at about 4 million at the moment, 4 to 5 million at the moment counted, which is a massive victory. And he's winning it in places like New York and California. Now, whether he is turning America more conservative or America is becoming more conservative, because actually, if you look at how the Democratic Party has responded to Trump on key issues like immigration, for example, basically they've moved to the right as well. No more talk about pathway to citizenship. For people who are in the country illegally. Very little talk about the Dreamers this election cycle. So I think you've got a country that is moving right, and I think he saw that, and he hustled and hustled during the court. Not necessarily just him, by the way, because we've talked at points where he didn't show up. There were fallow points where he wasn't doing very much. But his campaign was hustling, and they targeted getting out the popular vote. I think Democrats completely missed that.
In July, we logged into our laptop computers. There was a visual of Trump being shot, fight, fight, fight. And you said to me, he's going to win the election. And I said to you that he was going to win the election. And then the woke mind virus came in. And you and I said, oh, well, maybe he's not going to win the election. It hasn't really moved the polls that much. She's the younger person. Nikki Haley said that if they got rid of one of the two 80-year-olds, the younger person could probably win. And I think I bought that hook, line, and sinker. So I got this wrong. Dominic Sambrook, who is a brilliant man, and obviously on our sister show, The Rest is History, said, listen, I don't want Trump to win, but he's going to win. And here are the reasons why, all the ones that you just pointed out. Now, maybe I put my emotion into my decision-making, and maybe I didn't see it clearly. But do you think the assassination attempt and that bloody stain, I mean, he got 89% of Butler County, by the way, where he was shot at, and he returned to Butler County. Do you think ultimately we were right in July, and then I brainwashed myself out of that in the ensuing months?
Well, that was before Kamala Harris had come into the race, and we were up against Joe Biden, so it was a very different race. And Kamala Harris did change the dynamic, I think. And again, we'll talk about the Democrats in the second half, but I think I don't know how much impact I guess it made him look like somebody who fights for Americans, who will when he could then go out and say, "I took a bullet for you." That may have had a resonance. I think we're going to have to wait a little while before we know how much impact that one incident had. But certainly his ability to go out before audiences and say, I'm one of you. Look how much I am sacrificed. And even, what we sort of dissed, I think, when he said, I could just be sitting at home. I don't need to be. It's an extension of that, right? I don't need to be doing this for you. I could be having a nice life. I was having a nice life. And at the very end, where he said, listen, if I don't succeed, this is your fault. It's because you guys, that final rally in Michigan, if we don't win, it's because you guys don't get out and vote. Even that, I think. One of the things, I think there was a great article in the New York Times about the degree to which we miss the extent that at his rallies, things that on television sound, kind of disrespectful or crude or misogynistic or even racist, actually the audience takes as fun. They just think, oh, well, that, he's entertaining. And I think that's another thing that we underestimated in 2016 the degree to which, as an apprentice star, he was an entertainer. And at his rallies, people were laughing at that. It was kind of slightly the woke thing that he can say stuff that we can't get away with. Even the shark stuff, where he rambles on about a shark and an electric battery. It's fun. And I think don't underestimate that. The final thing I want to say, and we are going to take a break because we don't want this to be a super long episode. You've all had enough of American politics this week. Is that the role of, you mentioned it a couple of days ago, the role of Elon Musk, you mentioned it in terms of money. I would mention it in terms of mis and disinformation. There is a ton of it out there. And we'll talk about this in the second half. The Democrats are going to have to learn how to fight on that playing field because it's the battlefield they have. But it's a real thing in American politics. We have a misinformation correspondent, Mariana Spring at BBC, who's doing brilliant work. And she records the amount of mis and disinformation that people are getting through social media feeds is just staggering.
And believing, by the way, they're getting the misinformation and they're believing.
Seeing and believing, yeah.
Yes,
and that,
seeing and believing.
It tilts the playing field. Just about still awake. And Anthony, who is just about still awake.
No, I'm not awake. Look,
you are
look
much
at
better
this.
at no sleep than I am. I don't manage.
I've got my Starbucks holiday cup. Not enough. It's not enough. I got the hot coffee going too. Helps the digestive tract. I'm just letting you know. I am dying, okay, but it's fine. I just want to say to Tony Pastor, 1 hour a week included 16 straight hours of broadcasting, okay? Love you, Tony Pastor.
Yeah. It's an election week. That's what we do. Can I just say one thing? This, for our viewers, we are going to carry on this podcast. Anthony and I thought we might only do this podcast through the election. Obviously, we're so gratified by your response to the podcast. We will be carrying on after the election for everybody. And it suddenly looks like we're going to have an awful lot more to talk about. And we will be doing so over the next few months.
Well, first of all, I am delighted to be your partner on this. But the truth of the matter is,
we may get it back to more like 1 or 2 hours a week. I promise you.
I am a little horrified, though, because you just talked about misinformation and you just talked about there's one team that doesn't understand the game. And there's another team that's running up the score on the team that doesn't understand the game. And I find that astonishing at this stage in American political history. And, Barack Obama got it in 2008, got it well. Joe Biden didn't really need to get it because Trump was so out of control during COVID that they were like, okay, we're going with, instead of crazy uncle, we're going to go with stable grandfather. Okay. But it turns out we don't want nice sister. And we don't remember crazy uncle being as crazy as he was during that 4 years. And so flood the zone with disinformation, a Steve Bannon term, flood the zone with disinformation. Let's bring crazy uncle back. And they did something brilliant. I have to acknowledge it. They won the popular vote. Okay, so Susie Wiles, Chris LaCivita, we're going to kick your ass in the Electoral College. All the liberals are going to be, we won the popular vote. We're going to own you with the popular vote.
And they had an outright.
Okay, so what's the liberals' response?
So first of all, they probably need to go and, spend 2 weeks sitting on an island somewhere with a lot of Haagen-Dazs ice cream to get over their massive depression. And it's extraordinary the degree to which the Democrats are, this is cataclysmic for them. I have rarely seen a party this down. And it makes you realize that this was, for Democrats, and this may be a problem, this election was not just about winning, it was about Donald Trump losing. They didn't want to give Donald Trump the opportunity to have a second win. Now, some of them because they think he's a threat to the country, and we'll be talking more about that, especially as it looks like he's going to have the Senate and the House over the next few weeks. But for some of them, it was just that they feel they have, Trump derangement syndrome, as we've spoken about. And so they hate him so much that they couldn't bear the idea of him winning. But there is a realization that they need a long, hard look at why they are no longer the Democratic Party of the 1990s, why they do not have Bill Clinton's appeal to America's working class. So Bill Clinton brilliantly managed to pivot to the center and keep the American white working class and keep the American black working class with him. Now, Hispanic voters were not as big a proportion of the electorate as they were then, and I don't know whether the landscape globally, domestically, demographically has just changed so much that even a Bill Clinton type figure wouldn't be able to build that solid Democratic coalition that he built in the 1990s. But he managed to do it. And I think for Democrats now, they have to think, why have we become the party of urban educated elites and not the party of America's working class? Because this was a class election, not an identity election. And I think that is also something Democrats are going to have to look at. I think there's been a realization that they can't play identity politics. It's why Kamala Harris didn't do what Hillary Clinton did. She did not lean into her race. She did not lean into her gender. There was none of the "I'm with her" sloganeering of 2016. So she understood that, but the party didn't manage to hold together the working class. And maybe the economic headwinds were too strong. I mean, it's possible that no Democrat, and certainly not one associated with this administration, which has been in power whilst inflation has been this high, that no Democrat could have combated what was clearly, a big red wave sweeping across America.
I again agree. The only thing I would add to what you just said.
By the way, I didn't answer what they should do. I just was
No.
looking
I
at the
understand that
analysis of the landscape.
Yeah. Well, we have to figure out what happened, and then you got to figure out what they're going to
Right.
do. They're not going to do what they should do, by the way, because in my conversations with them, they still don't get Trump. Okay, your friend Jennifer Palmieri gets Trump. Okay, Trump is a prejudiced political figure. He's incredibly hardworking, and he is a powerful force in the body politic over the last 12 years. Okay, they're blindsided by his misogyny. They're blindsided by his racism. They're blindsided by the way he talks about non-white immigrants like they're vermin. They get blindsided and triggered by all of that. Okay, and they don't see the powerful political force that the guy is. You don't have to like the guy. You have to objectively analyze him and say this dude is a force. He's a force like Barack Obama, whether you like it or not. He's a force like Bill Clinton. And let me tell you something, okay? You think it's hard to win the White House? How about losing the White House and then returning to the White House? We've only had one person in history other than Donald Trump, and that's Grover Cleveland. So take a step back, fellas, and recognize what you're doing, okay? You're going up against a cultural movement, and you're going up against the man that's the center of that movement. And these people act like, oh, he sucks. And can you believe he said this? And oh, he said that. And ooh, hey guys, let me get a cold ice bucket filled with water, pour it over your head, wake up. Okay, you're ignoring. And by the way, Bernie Sanders, and I think I told you this, Corey Lewandowski and I used to go to Bernie Sanders rallies in 2016. And you say, what the hell are you doing there? Well, they were next to our rallies. I wanted to see what the hell was going on. They were the same rallies, Caddy.
They're the same rallies. They're singing from the same hymn book. Okay, so let me quickly do a pop quiz for you because it gets exactly to what you're saying.
Yeah, go ahead.
Who said voters understand the difference between what offends them and what affects them?
Okay, I don't know. I'm going to say Bernie Sanders.
Okay.
I don't know. Who is
No, it was Kellyanne Conway in 2016.
Okay.
In 2016. And I think that's what you're getting to, right?
Yeah.
That Democrats think that what offends them, Democrats, is going to make the difference. And actually, a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump were offended by Donald Trump, but they realize that it's not what affects them in their daily life.
Working class, Bernie Sanders, Senator Sanders, an independent that caucuses with the Democrats, says you guys ran a terrible campaign. Okay, the working class people have their hands up and they say, please help us, please help us. And you're getting endorsements from J-Lo and you're getting endorsements from Bruce Springsteen, and you're going to concerts when you're not knocking on doors. There's a white woman who I'm close to. She lives in Suffolk County. She just sent me something. She said, Anthony, I want you to see these pictures. For the last year, I've knocked on over 1,000 doors in Pennsylvania. I bought the signs myself. And every door I knocked on, I said, could you please put this Trump sign down on your front lawn? And she's showing me pictures of these people. And she says, I just want you to know these people are loving people. They love God. They love country. They love family. And oh, by the way, we are not against immigrants. We're just not for open borders. We want legal immigrants the way your grandparents and my grandparents came into the country. And I know you probably don't believe this, but we are not far from turning New York State red, Catty K. We are not far. Okay. And so, guys on the Democratic side, you got to wake up, or you don't have to wake up and let the whole country be red. That's fine. And you'll say, oh, it was a tiny 100 you know what somebody said to me from their campaign? It was just 170,000 votes in the three blue wall states. If they swung our way, we would have won. He only won by 1%. Dudes, he got the majority of the country. He's talking like a complete raving lunatic, to your point that Kellyanne Conway said, and he got the majority of the country. You think you might want to go back to the tool shed and come up with a different product?
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, look, I don't think she could do it. And I think the other thing that, I mean, I think that's the idea that she was just hanging out with celebrities is a little unfair. I mean, I think they did. They first of all, she had an incredibly broad coalition to keep together, stretching from Liz Cheney on one hand to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders on the other.
You're right. I am being unfair because she did do a lot of things that Hillary Clinton didn't do. And
Yeah,
I was just saying that for dramatic effect. You are right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, and she did a ton of rallies. I think she worked her ass off to get this presidency. In a short amount of time, she did as much as she could. She could just never distance herself from the Biden campaign in the way that she needed to, or the Biden administration in the way that she needed to. She didn't have an answer, as we've always said, to either why didn't they shut the borders earlier when there were people coming across, and blaming it on Trump pulling that immigration bill and stopping Republicans from voting for that immigration bill just wasn't good enough. And she didn't have an answer to what she was going to do about inflation, to bring it down for people if she was elected for a second term. So I think there are practical reasons why she lost. I mean, I think your neighbor is right that there's a whole swathe of the country that is more conservative than Democrats understand. Now, where that leaves the Democratic Party, I don't know. Because I mean, what we're not talking about here is, were they wrong when John Kelly said, listen, I think he fits the definition of a fascist? Should they just have ignored that? Should they just have not spoken about that? Should they just have not mentioned January the 6th? I don't know if that's an option. Maybe all of those Liz Cheney type Republicans, the country club Republicans, who really are worried about Donald Trump's autocratic tendencies and what he wants to do with America and American foreign policy, maybe they're all Democrats anyway by now. And so there wasn't much point talking about that. But do you think they were mistaken then? I mean, we spoke about it a lot on this podcast when John Kelly said, listen, I was this guy's chief of staff, his longest running chief of staff, and I'm a U.S. general, Marine general or Army general?
No, Marine. Yeah, it was
Marine
a four-star
general.
Marine general. Very
Yeah,
hard
it was
to be a
four-star Marine
Marine
general.
general. Yeah. Okay.
And I think America is about to elect somebody who may be a fascist or have fascists fit the definition of a fascist. Should they just have ignored all of that?
No, they shouldn't have ignored all of that, but they needed to supplement it. I'm showing you something that you probably can't
Okay, I have to put
see.
my glasses on. Wait.
But you see, that's Megamind, Catty K. You know who Megamind is? Okay.
No.
Megamind is the
That
evil.
looks like. Oh yes, I do see that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
He's in. Yeah, I know who he is.
You know who he is, right?
Despicable Me, right?
Yeah, he's despicable. He is the Megamind from Despicable Me. He's a DreamWorks fictional character. He's an evil genius. Okay. The Republicans had an evil genius. I won't say his name. You know his name, but let me tell you what they didn't have. They didn't have a Megamind. They didn't have somebody that said, "Hey, they're manipulating social media. What are we going to do to counteract it? Hey, they're on bro podcasts.
Yeah.
What are we going to do to counteract it? Do we send her on
Right.
Rogan? Do we don't send her on Rogan? Maybe the decision to not send her on Rogan was fine, but then is there something else that we can do?"
Right.
Okay, so in other words, they've got an evil genius. They're manipulating information. They're manipulating algorithms. They've got an evil genius that studied the entire footprint of the country, and they've figured out a way to get out the vote in a more efficient way than us. What are we doing? Okay, this would be like we're generals in the army, and we're watching troop movement, and we're sitting there saying, "Wow, we're stunned that they're they're moving the troops in that way, and they didn't counterattack it. Now maybe again, maybe it's not fair. 105 days, 21st of July to November 5th. Okay, maybe it's just not fair. Maybe you can't do all of that. Maybe you can't prepare for that. She's merging her staff from the vice presidency into the Joe Biden campaign team. Maybe they just couldn't orchestrate in time all the rebuttals that they needed. But it doesn't matter now. What matters now, what did they do to you? How did they do it? And how are you going to change your ideological footprint? Because they could do it.
How are you going to embrace the idea that you misread the country? And what are you going to do about that?
Are you going to be a bunch of prigs and you're going to be a bunch of condescending prigs? Or are you going to say, wow, okay, let's get our shit together here? Caddy, why are you laughing, Caddy? Why are you laughing?
Because I love the phrase condescending prigs. I mean, if somebody suggested to me that I had a choice between being a condescending prig and not being a condescending prig, I would probably go for the no.
Right, but they are condescending prigs, by the way.
Listen, okay. They're going to go away.
You're actually impressed that I know what that word is, right?
I like that. The prig word, yes.
Yeah, I told Gary Lineker when people started writing nasty things about me in the press, somebody called me a popinjay. I had to look the goddamn thing up. I didn't even know what it meant. I thought he was calling me a bird. It turned out he wasn't calling me a bird, Caddy.
So listen, our commitment to all of you who are listening is that we are heading into a tumultuous period in American politics, which will have implications around the world. It is potentially going to be a pretty heavy-going period in American politics if Donald Trump tries to do everything that he said he wanted to do. But our commitment to you is that we will not let us, on the Rest is Politics US, depress us. And we will continue to find moments of levity in the midst of this extraordinary storm, which I think is fair enough to call it a storm because everything is being moved around. It's a hurricane that is blowing through American politics. And we will give you moments of respite in the middle of it all.
Are we saying goodbye now?
I think we're going to say goodbye.
We're saying goodbye
because people have had an awful lot of us this week, and I don't want to, take up all of their time. And we have so much that we're going to talk about over the next few weeks. We'll dive into all of this much more, and there'll be a lot more that we have to say. But I think for the moment, let's give them a good weekend. What do you think?
Okay, so we do have to plug our members episode.
Oh yes, okay, you do that. You're the best salesman.
No, you do that. No, please, you do that. Yeah, I was trounced in my salesmanship by Dominic Sandbrook. You're trouncing me. You could be like the best Wall Street institutional salesman. Please, you do. You plug the members episode.
Okay, and for our founding members, we will have a bonus question and answer episode that comes out on Saturday morning. Please join us for that. I'm really sorry it won't be in the Lamborghini this time, but we're going to revisit that whole Lamborghini idea because we've both got a lot of ideas that came out of that. That was a really fun episode. But we will take your questions and we will answer them just for you founding members on Saturday. So tune in for that.